You know something's wrong. You feel it literally deep in your bones. It's this crushing exhaustion that no amount of sleep fixes, or a racing heart out of nowhere, or a widespread, burning pain that you just can't pinpoint. You know your body is failing you in ways you can barely even find the words to explain.
But then comes this cold, incredibly uncomfortable truth. What if the absolute hardest part of being sick isn't the illness itself, but having to desperately prove to the rest of the world that you're actually sick at all?
Just imagine sitting in that cold, sterile doctor's office. You're exhausted, you've waited months for this appointment, meticulously tracking every single symptom, just praying for an answer. And then the doctor looks at you, closes your chart, and says, "Your tests came back normal." It's a crushing, deeply confusing feeling. You're sitting there knowing your body is actively betraying you, but on paper, you look completely fine. So they tell you it's probably just stress, or maybe anxiety.
And then you go home. You turn to your friends, your family, your coworkers, just looking for a little bit of comfort, only to hear them say things like, "But you look so healthy," or, "Well, you were fine yesterday." It is the ultimate isolation. You're trapped in a failing body while society treats you like you're just exaggerating, seeking attention, or, honestly, just being lazy. Why do invisible illnesses get dismissed so easily? Why does being doubted hurt more than the illness itself? And what actually happens to your identity when your body betrays you?
The Cheater Detection Module: Why Human Nature Demands Visible Proof.
To understand why you're not believed, we actually have to look back thousands of years. Think about it. In our ancestral environments, if someone broke their leg, you could literally see the bone. Visible illness triggers immediate empathy and support. But the human brain also has this built-in cheater detection module. Our ancestors' survival relied on making sure no one was hoarding resources without contributing. Because our brains rely so heavily on visible cues, the absence of an obvious physical mark triggers this module. It leads to the automatic and completely false perception that a person is just faking it. And this evolutionary bias bleeds right into modern medicine. It creates what we call medical gaslighting. This is when healthcare providers dismiss, downplay, or totally invalidate your physical symptoms, often blaming them on psychological causes like just stress. This disproportionately affects women, who are routinely and unfairly stereotyped as emotional. Instead of actually investigating the root cause of the pain, they're handed a sedative and sent home. And the staggering cost of that bias? 4.6. That is the average number of years, and it takes an average of 5 different doctors for a woman to finally get an accurate autoimmune diagnosis. For almost 5 years, she's told it's all in her head.
Most people have no idea about this next ad, but the vast majority of chronic conditions are completely hidden. We're talking 70 to 80% of all disabilities being totally invisible to the naked eye. This means almost everyone knows someone who is secretly suffering, fighting a daily battle that no one else can even see.
But here's where it gets worse. And this is the part almost nobody talks about. What if I told you that the longer you're not believed, the more likely you are to start not believing yourself? And that this psychological trauma actively makes your physical pain worse? To understand why this happens, we need to look at how our brains process reality. Take the famous checker shadow illusion. Square A and square B are the exact same shade of gray. Now, I know your brain is absolutely screaming that they're different, but they are identical. Why? Because your brain doesn't just passively record the world like a camera, it actively predicts it. It expects a shadow to make a surface darker, so it alters your perception, making you see square B as lighter. Basically, your brain constantly shapes your reality based on its expectations.
So how does this backfire when you have an invisible illness? Well, when a doctor gaslights you and your family doubts you, it creates this profound chronic anxiety. Your brain starts interpreting this intense emotional fear as a signal that you are under constant threat. It shifts from normal sensory processing into a state of high alert. Your nervous system becomes hyperactive, and it actually amplifies physical pain signals. Ordinary touch can suddenly feel like a burning pain. This is central sensitization. The emotional trauma of not being believed literally rewires your nervous system to make your physical suffering even more intense.
The psychological toll of this battle is incredibly heavy. When researchers looked at women whose physical symptoms were dismissed by doctors, a massive 40% of them showed signs of clinical depression. Many even developed symptoms consistent with PTSD. We're talking panic attacks and hypervigilance, just from the thought of having to go to another doctor's appointment, completely terrified of being humiliated and dismissed yet again.
Biographical disruption: the grief of losing your old self.
This builds into the deepest emotional wound of all. Sociologists call it biographical disruption. It isn't just about managing a disease, it's the profound, quiet grief of an identity crisis. The sociologist Michael Burry noted, "Inside every chronic patient is an acute patient wondering what happened. You're forced to mourn the person you used to be, the person who could go for a run, the person who could stay out late, the person who could just rely on their body to function. That version of you is gone, and you have to somehow build a completely new identity while feeling totally unmoored."
And society offers you absolutely no grace during this transition. Instead, you're forced to walk this impossible tightrope. You have to perform what sociologists call invisible work. You've got to expend precious energy trying to appear healthy enough to keep your job and not be labeled a burden, while simultaneously having to prove you're sick enough to actually deserve medical help or simple accommodation. If you look too sick, you're being dramatic. If you look too healthy, you're faking it. It's a completely exhausting performance.
Hey, if you enjoy explainers that dive into how the mind really works and the hidden societal forces that shape our lives, you might want to stick around and see what we cover next. Living with an invisible illness means fighting a war on two fronts: the war against your failing body and the war against a world that demands proof of your suffering. But your pain is valid. Your experience is real. Just because you can't see the wound doesn't mean it isn't real.
We've grounded everything in today's explainer in actual medical and sociological research. Check the description below for a deeper dive into the articles, studies, and resources on predictive processing, central sensitization, and invisible illness. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.